I'm addressing this letter, dear poor people, DPP. I'm addressing this letter, DPP, DPP. Hey, yo, DPP, knowledge the key. And all you ain't gotta have a college degree. The answers on your laptop, the answers on your phone. Used to dread the commute, now we working from home. You are not born smart America. Age, gender, race, no longer a barrier. Hop on this road to wealth, the more the merrier. DPP teach you what you should know, so you can grow, apply yourself, and graduate from being poor. DPP. You're now tuned in to the Dear Poor People podcast with your host, Coach Mika.
Welcome to today's live book talk, We Overcame. I'm very happy to have you here to hear me talk about the book that I wrote, We Overcame. And we will begin. We want to thank the Lord for this awesome opportunity. And so we'll begin with the story. And then we'll have a little book talk afterwards. We Overcame is a book inspired by the Negro spiritual, We Shall Overcome, by Charles Albert Tindley. Someday is not on the calendar. Let's define someday. So in this book, someday is defined as February 1st, 2035. And then what we do is we define what someday is, and we're going backwards to show how did we get to this February 2nd, 2035. Our story begins in November 2020. We elected Andrew Yang as president of the United States of America. He was able to unify the working class through his economic policy on universal basic income, in which every adult over 18 received $1,300 per month, with $300 being applied towards one's health care. Okay, so we're going to go to the next page. Of course, the government took its cut right off the top for those who owed back taxes, child support, and student loans. If we can go back to that previous picture, and student loans, it still left the average adult with at least an additional $500 a month that they did not have previously. This helped those who were constantly underwater financially begin to breathe. Next picture. Previous government assistance programs encouraged the separation of families, but now many families were able to raise their children in stronger two-parent households. Oftentimes before, with food assistance programs, for example, a two-parent household would cause a reduction in benefits. Housing assistance program rules even prevented two parents from being in a unified household. Previously, families with only one parent with children could often receive more benefits than a household with two working parents. The Universal Basic Income, UBI policy, did not have income restrictions, and as a result, most families embraced the American dream and were able to stay together on paper and in life. Okay. And then previously, poverty was very stressful, making one feel like they are playing a live version of the game Twister, with one never having enough limbs to cover all the gaps. Everyone's stress levels came down significantly, and citizens became healthier with the advancement of the UBI policy. Now, we're going to stay on this particular picture. Many adults started their own small businesses, often at home, with the additional monthly income from the new UBI policy. Thanks to the internet, people were able to express themselves freely, regardless of age, gender, or race. Many even created businesses dependent upon their relationship with others. Children did not wait until they turned 16 to find their first job. They created their own streams of income before they hit puberty. Financial literacy and entrepreneurship were woven into the educational system from elementary to high school. All children understood the rules, both written and unwritten, of capitalism and free market economics. With new knowledge and independence, they all began to live by the Wu-Tang Clan's model of cream, cash rules everything around me. With advances in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality, we made justice blind. Police cars were upgraded with new technology that prevented personal bias and prejudgment. Sensors on the car could measure a person's height and body dimensions. Upon getting the results of the body scan, the car would inform the police officer that, for example, they were pointing their gun at a child and not an adult. If the police officer did not lower their gun, the car tased the officer. Children playing with toys weren't mistaken for adults with weapons anymore. Parents no longer feared that their children would return home safe and alive. The steering wheel also doubled as a lie detector. When the officer attempted to put on their lights for a traffic stop for an unjustified reason, the car would ask the officer why they were stopping the person. If the officer could not justify the reason, the lights and sirens would not turn on. Data was collected on every traffic stop. That data was then transferred immediately to the officer's commanding officer, as well as an elected citizen advisory board that randomly audited cases on a monthly basis. In the courts, an Alexa-like device was used in the jury room. Anytime a juror came to a false conclusion that was not substantiated by the facts of the case during the trial, the Alexa-like device would correct a mistaken juror and inform the jury of what was truly presented at trial. Judges did not issue a sentence without submitting their proposed recommendations into an app that housed millions of previous cases. Upon entering the sentencing recommendation, the app would compare the judge's recommendation with similar cases in the respective state that the crime took place in, or against all federal cases for federal crimes. The app would look for racial bias and fairness in sentencing. If the sentence recommendation was not fair and consistent, it would throw the judge's sentencing out and make a recommendation that was fair. An amendment was added to the Constitution that prevented men from ever writing laws pertaining to women's health without committees consisting of 90% female legislators. The picture that should be on the screen now is the one with the, visors on there. Like, just scoot up just a little bit. There we go, right there. With virtual reality simulations, everyone had the opportunity to exchange experiences such as white privilege, being a woman, or being a Black male in society. These experiences created more empathy in a society that had long built walls between people and groups. These simulations created opportunities for groups to have difficult but necessary conversations about their different experiences. The opportunity to build solutions begins with us. What does your someday look like? Thank you for allowing me to spend a little time with you with my book, We Overcame. So, what I wanted to do now was just do a little bit of a book, exploration as to why I wrote the book. Okay, so why did I initially write the book? I wrote the book initially because I have spent 14 years in the industry of poverty. And yes, I did say industry. We make money off the poor every day. And so off of our ignorance, which means to be without knowledge. Okay, it does not mean stupid. So I'm not saying anyone is stupid, but we are without knowledge and naivety. Okay. And so in that time of working with the underserved, I've had the opportunity to work with the underserved in various organizations such as WIA, which is now Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And so in that, I helped people find employment. I then spent 9 years with the Department of Social Services. So I worked with SNAP and TANF clients. I'm helping them to find employment and resources. And then now I am hopefully with my last employer, and that is I work now helping people with disability. So I review the disability claims and make a determination with the doctor. I prepare it for the doctor so that they can make that determination ultimately if someone meets the definition of disability. And so with that insight, all of these things came to me about what is wrong with our society, and things like that, and what we can do to solve it. Now I got particularly inspired to write We Overcame because as an African American, we are all, regardless of what our income level is, just the sheer fact that we are African American or Black really in our society has defined us as poor, no matter. And so that's why you'll see even when people get pulled over in like well-to-do neighborhoods, people are like, okay, did you live there? And things like that, because the default for African Americans is poor. And so that's why the book primarily deals with trying to inspire the Black community to realize now that we are in a smart America, we now have the opportunity to utilize technology to rebuild our communities and strengthen our communities. And so that's really what I wanted to convey with that book. Now, interestingly enough, and we'll go to the next slide, why did I wait until now to acknowledge the book? So as I wrote the book in 2020 I was inspired by the 2020 election, and I was a member of the Yang Gang. I like the idea of UBI. I think it's a much more fair system than our current safety net, which is really a safety trap. And so I really wanted to gi- give everyone the opportunity to really develop. I think money in this country, you can do so much more with money than you can without. And so with that, getting everyone to having some more income coming in, I think it could resolve a lot of issues. So why did I wait until now to actually acknowledge the book that I wrote in 2020? One, a lot of it is like that inner confidence was not there. We've made talking about poverty or being poor a very negative thing to talk about. People are ashamed, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. As a matter of fact, 60% of the population is robbing Peter to pay Paul and Hail and Mary. By Sunday, African Americans only or Black people only make up 13% of the population. So that 60% is a whole bunch of people, but because we don't talk about it and we share everything else in social media, but we don't share our struggles and our trials and tribulations. And if we open the opportunity to talk more about poverty, I think we could solve a lot of things. But because we have relegated it to an insult as opposed to an opportunity, then a lot of that is shut down. A lot of people will not ask probing questions because they think they're already supposed to know it. But if you have a question, you should always ask because, as they say, a closed mouth won't get fed. And so, and just to bring some levity into this discussion, remember the scene in Real Housewives where Nene Leakes and Sheree Whitfield were sitting at the table at the coffee house, and Nene says, "Rich bitch." You would never hear somebody say, "I'm poor bitch." And we need to say that more often because then we can get to the root causes of those things. But if we're never questioning why we're in the situation and we're just only inhaling that negativity from that word, we will never progress. And that's irregardless of color. So white people need to be doing that as well. There's a lot, and I'm probably will go into this a little bit later, but I totally know why there were white poor people at the January 6th. Now, why there were rich white people, I don't know because they know how capitalism works. But poor white people were there truly wanting to understand, how do I take care of my children now? How do I make ends meet now? And unfortunately, we still are not telling them the proper things that we need to be telling them in terms of harnessing technology to improve your income and your lifestyle. So that applies regardless of color. But with my book and everything that I'm trying to do, I really want to make sure that if no other group gets it, it definitely hits home for us as African Americans that we definitely have to harness technology. So let's go on to the next slide and talk a little bit. The reason why I decided to do this, to reinitiate this book or acknowledge that I had even written this book, because I let it sit on Amazon for 4 years and I didn't talk about it. As you heard me say, I didn't talk about it because society never wants you to talk about poverty. We want to make it something where we blame the person when there are systems in place that are causing a lot of this. And so because we're not talking about it, we're holding it in, which is also causing health problems. Okay. We don't connect poverty to mental health. We don't connect poverty to overeating, which then can cause inflammation in the body. You can have heart attacks. You can have numerous things, alcohol abuse, cigarettes abuse as well, tobacco abuse. All of those things are all technically connected. Okay. And so since we don't talk about those things, we aren't solving for those issues in our society. And so I felt like it was important to start bringing this up just because it is so relevant for the time that we're in. And I don't want us to miss this moment. What I discovered with capitalism, well, I wanted to explain that capitalism, Trumpism are two of the main reasons why I decided to revisit this book now. If we can go to the next page, we'll define what capitalism is. So the textbook definition of capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. In that definition, there's no mention of winning and losing, power, all the isms, ageism, racism, sexism. We don't mention any of that in capitalism. So when your child in the 12th grade takes their American economics class and their financial literacy class, capitalism is not described as cutthroat. It's not described as a game that you're competing in and all of those kinds of things. So that is very deceiving that a great majority of the population does not even know that they're playing a game every single day, that they're getting up. Once the Lord has woken you up, you got to put your sneakers on because you're in a game and nobody's telling you to put your sneakers on. Okay. So if we can go to the next slide, which is and I want to connect the capitalism to racism, okay? Because a lot of times we don't talk about, we separate those two. When we were in a narrative world, we could separate the two. But technically, now that we are in a smart America, which is now where we can see everything, we can see how power moves, how power is not moving. We can see those things, we can feel it, we can visualize it. I wanted to put that in a video format. So here you can see I use, and this is all AI, and hopefully nobody will sue me because I have their likeness in the picture. But what I wanted to show you is this is Steph Curry. He's one of our best basketball players in the world. And probably if he had not been on the team this year for the Olympics, we wouldn't have won because now everybody else's team is stepping up their game. But as you can see, and on each of the basketballs, there's topics on there. So Ketanji Brown Jackson, that one made it into the basket. The next one should be Voting Rights Act. It missed the basket because it was blocked. And so that is what this gentleman is showing is like even though Steph Curry is doing his best, even at his best, the ability to be able to effectively get it in is not always going to be there. So there's always going to be that block. And what I realize, especially now that Trump just really illustrated the power of being white. And what we do in this country is that at the end of the day, white still has to win. And so when you hear the book banning and things like that, where we were saying, oh, well, the children, that's too, their lives are too precious for them to hear these bad things. That's because we're also saying that is the nature of our country, is that white must win all the time and everybody else will be relegated to losers, so to speak. And so when I worked with DSS, what I noticed is that I was in the position of power. And so when I would interact with someone, and I might say, like, this was very early on in my career, I might say somebody called and said, hey, what's the status of my benefits? I'd say, oh, your benefits looks like everything's there. It's going to be on Tuesday. Well, I wasn't in the position of power to control whether those benefits were going to be on that card. They could be handled in any of the 46 counties. So after getting burned a couple of times where the person was like, well, hey, you said they were going to be on here on Tuesday, I learned not to ever commit to something unless I personally on my team were going to be the ones processing that case, because I realized in that instance that like I was the person in the position of power, and the people that I was supporting really truly took me at my word. They didn't know that, okay, well, even if she says it, still have a plan B or a C and things like that. And that's when I began to see all the workings of how power works, and understanding that now poverty or being poor, because now we live in a smart America, because we have access to the technology. I'm gonna just hold up my phone. We have everything that we need in order to answer any question we have in the palm of our hands now. And so that changes the I guess the identity dynamics. We're having an identity war on identities that really are not the most important ones in the context of being in a smart America. In a smart America, you really want to know, okay, what's my economic status? Okay, my economic status is poor. However, now that I have the answers to everything that I need in order to solve for any problem that I might have, for example, I could like get on Chat GPT and ask for give me 5 revenue streams that I can start for $100 if that's all I had to my name. Or now we have additional apps that we can use like TaskRabbit. I just recently got started on Shipt. I haven't done my first order or anything like that, but those are additional revenue streams because that's how we should be talking now. We should not be talking about like yes, a job could be a revenue stream, but the overall language we should be using is this. Do you have a revenue stream? Do you have multiple revenue streams? So it could be that you're working like I work 2 jobs, plus, like I just mentioned, I have now access to the Ship app. I have also signed up for like We Go Look, which lets you do inspections in your immediate area for like car repairs, like insurance agencies want you to go out and do inspections and then they'll pay you. So there's numerous ways to find income. And so that's how we should be talking now. It's like when you're working, instead of saying, like now you quote unquote don't have to work, but you do have to have income coming into your household. Do you have some income producing activities? It could be anything such as what I'm doing right now, having a Zoom conversation. There could be somebody who decides that they want to buy the book after this. I'm also going to be doing a journal that has exercise activities with this that I hope to launch in February. So those are additional revenue streams. Once I get the YouTube going, that will be another revenue stream. And so that's how we need to change our language now that we are in a smart America. Okay. And so those are some of the things that I noticed that we were not talking about in with the underserved. We're not explaining these various definitions that now, as a result of the fact that you can now solve for the economics, you can now basically, instead of just focusing in on race as the primary identity, you now have to say, okay, and I'm just going to use a phoropter, which is the eye doctor, the machine that the eye doctor places in front of your eyes when you do an eye exam. One of your lenses should be for your primary lens now has to be the economic lens. And then you can make race or whatever one your secondary, whatever you prioritize is important, whether that be your feminism, your race, whatever, as your secondary. But this one should be your economic status is your primary one because that is now solvable. And then as a result, now that that is solvable, what you will find out is that there is another identity that we didn't even know existed, which was power. So that because of the exposure through technology, we're being able to see these new identities that now need to come to the forefront. So class, economic status, and then power. And those will tell you what you need to do. Because when you can reframe things, for example, Black is poor, now it is now our terminology or the way we say things should be Black who happens to be poor, because now you're saying, okay, this is solvable. I have a plan for that. But when you said Black is poor, because that is like a sentence with a period in it. Like it's a matter of fact, Black is poor. There was a phrase we use, a lot of old school people will say, the only 2 things I got to do is be Black and die. And so in that context, if you were using that sentence, Black is poor, then you would think, well, hey, I'm gonna be poor forever. So that is why you see some of the actions and behaviors happening in our community because it doesn't look like it's solvable. But that's just simply because we haven't spread that word that it is now solvable. We should be using phrase Black who happens to be poor, then making like vision maps or things like that to say, hey, now how do I get to my desired end goal? And so that has to be language that we need to start using in our communities. Okay, so now let's go on to the next slide. what I'm trying to capture here is that in the old world, the narrative world, the world in which was before the internet, it felt much more racism felt much more like a staggered race. Okay. So as you can see in this race, we've got it. Someone's in the first place, then the second, and the third. And so the fourth place winner has a farther distance to try to catch up to that person that was already in first place in life. And so that's how we have been feeling. Now, if we go to the next slide, with through technology, it's now more of a marathon. And so we're all running, we all have access thanks to our nifty little phones and devices that we use. We're now running much more of a marathon now. So capitalism, yes, racism, sexism, ageism, all of that is still going to play a part, but it doesn't have to be your defining part because now you have answers. You can create, like right now, if you find that you're being stifled in corporate America, guess what you can do is you can be starting a side business that fulfills you. You might keep your corporate job because of the insurance and things like that, but you could be building something on the side that's more reflective of you. Or and some folks, what they will do is they'll build that, use their time in corporate America to build something successful on the side. And then when it takes off, they're gone. But that's what we have now is we don't have to say, oh, you're stuck. You're in a dead end job with somebody that you can't even stand anymore. You can be building something on the side. So that is what we're trying to convey in this picture is that capitalism is more of a marathon in a tech driven society. What comes into play now is that we're not speaking to all of this stuff. So now we're still behind, even though we've all got the key to freedom in our hands. The sheer fact that we don't know that we have the key to freedom in our hands is problematic. Okay. So I want to go to the next slide. And so I wanted just to illustrate what's happening to white people in this situation. So here you have Trump inside his motorcade, and you see everyone in there dressed up in their American flags, his supporters, okay? And we want to humanize them. We do not want to demonize them. We want to understand why they're operating in this way, why they're getting caught up in his rhetoric that is so harmful to them because they don't gain anything. But see, what's happening is that they have the power of being white. Their skin is white. And they think that what he's saying applies to them. But what's happening is, as you can see, they still didn't get inside the car with him. So he's not going to take them where he claims he's going to take them. He's not going to, everything that he's saying about, oh, we're going to fix this and we're going to fix that. He's only going to fix it for the people that are already rich. Okay. These folks will, they're being used. So this is why we don't have things like in all 50 states, the Medicaid expansion. Okay. Because you could play up on poor white people to say, hey, somehow he's going to make it better for them and not for you, which is not the case. There's hundreds of thousands of South Carolinians who are sick that are of all colors, and especially white people in South Carolina who could benefit from Medicaid expansion, but we let race play a factor in that decision to expand Medicaid, and which is what we're doing with the immigration. The immigration issue is not what it really is said to be. None of those folks that are crossing that border are going to impact your job. Now, if you do not step into technology and embrace it, because if you don't embrace it, it will embrace you and take you over. But if you embrace it and get ahead of it, then you will keep moving along. But if you don't, and which is why they keep harping on immigration as an excuse, they want to give an excuse to white America to explain, okay, this is why you're not successful. It's because of these people. It's the othering of people instead of acknowledging that we are now in the midst of a technological revolution and a racial reckoning. So those two combinations is very powerful. So they're trying to find an excuse. We don't need an excuse. We need solutions. We need to talk about the truth. Yes, there are way too many people crossing the border, but what we should be doing is saying, hey, what can we do? Because our hands are dirty and why those countries are not safe for their own citizens. And how do we fix those countries so that then folks don't have to come to our country for a better life? If their life is good in their own home country, they will stay there. That's just, it makes perfect sense. I don't know why we're exploiting. I do know why we're exploiting immigration. We're exploiting immigration so that it's serving as a disguise on what the real issue is we're going to have an issue when people do not realize that they needed to be caught up on technology and being able to use it in their daily lives and embrace it. We make it feel optional in those communities of all colors. If you're poor, a lot of technology, one is it's expensive, so you don't think you have to have it, and it gives off the impression that we've gamified it. So we made it cool. So we've hidden kind of the importance of it. So we've gamified it so that people think it's like, oh, it's optional. It's technically not optional. I have grandparents that would have been fine. They've both gone on to glory, but if they lived today, they would have known, they know how to eat off the land. They know how to raise their own crops. They know how to butcher a hog. They know how to sew and cook. We don't know how to do those things anymore. Okay. We can learn those things, but you have to make a decision to say, hey, you know what? I recognize technology is coming. I don't want to participate, so I'm going to learn those skills again. If that is you, great, but acknowledge that. If it's not, and you're going to have to, that you don't plan to do any of those things, then you're going to have to participate in capitalism in one shape or another. So you're going to have to embrace it, whether you want to or not. And definitely as parents, I want to speak to the parents for a minute and say, this is the world that your children are going to grow up in. So that's why I wanted to do this book. This book probably looks to everybody like it's a children's book, but it's really a book, a tabletop book with pictures for parents, for Black parents to say, hey, this is the world that your child is going to grow up in. And so let's help get our children prepared for that world, because society will try to keep us in the box that they have created, because we, for them, serve as a explanation as to why whatever barrier or issue is happening in white America, we're the other. So, like, for example, the whole notion of crime. Why are we the face of crime? Because they've taken the resources out of our communities. And what are you going to do when you don't have resources? You're going to resort to crime. You can see that even if you go to places in the Midwest. It happens. The lack of resources isn't tied to race. White people will act the same way when they do not have the resources. So poverty is not tied to race. It is tied to a lack of resources. Okay. And when you don't have the resources and you don't realize that you could have checked here first before you decided to make that poor decision, that's what will happen. And so what I realize now is a lot of it is that, going back to that video, that block shot, that's what they're doing, because they've, quote unquote, got to win. And they're uncomfortable now that they know that everybody's going to be winning. I don't understand why they don't want everybody to win. So, like, we all got to realize that's what's supposed to happen, is we all can win now. And so let's play according. Okay. We have the playbook. Okay. And I want you to utilize that playbook. Let's go on to the next slide. All right. So now what we're doing, I'm doing some calls to action. I just mentioned just now about the crime. So we don't want to be the face of crime in the remainder of the 21st century. We don't need to be their boogeyman anymore. We're not going to be their boogeyman anymore. So I've put out a No Crime November challenge. I know it's already November 3rd, but let's look at trying to stay out of trouble and stay in our bag. So start building those businesses It can be a one-person business. It can be the library is a great resource now, definitely here in the Charleston County Public Library. I live in Somerville, South Carolina. So Charleston County Library, they have the opportunity for you to use their Cricut machines if you wanted to do like a t-shirt company, those kinds of things. So definitely explore your libraries. I'll be going live a lot more and trying to start talking about these. We want to build a community. I just found some great software so that we can have the chats, we can have the conversations to talk about these kinds of things because we have the solutions for our community. What I learned from that book, those ideas that I have in that book are all viable right now. So I find it very interesting that nobody has moved in that direction of those things. So that tells me something about do they have a true desire to help, or was it just a good faith? Now that we know that they've only been operating in good faith, we now have to operate in true faith. We understand that they're only going to do only so much. So we've got to get energized. And so I want us to focus on No Crime November. Hopefully we'll carry it on to December, if I can get some more traction on it, so that we start understanding that we cannot be their boogeyman anymore. Our children are not their boogeyman. Okay. They're going to have the man in the mirror conversation to say, okay, now why are our children committing these atrocities and these school shootings? Mainly because they are the ones with the most access to power. So as you can see in some of the activities, like for example, January 6th would not have happened if there had been African Americans or Black people out there. I was at the original Million Man March, and they had police officers galore out there. So why was it not that way? It's mainly because there's a perception, oh, well, white people are not they're not the monsters. Okay. They're not the scary people. So everybody was like, okay, we can take a day off. No, like apply it to be universal with quote unquote who's bad in this country. But those are things that they're going to have to reckon with. But they're not going to reckon with it if we continue to provide them with the stereotypes that they're counting on. Okay. So this challenge is as much for them as it is for us because we have to self-identify now. One of the things with the journal that I want to do is really say now we get to own our own narrative. We don't have to have them define us. So one of the things I want you to do is say, hey, crime is not a part of my identity. Okay. Now, if it is, then you have to own that. And you also have to own the consequences of your action. That's one of the beautiful things about this moment in time is we don't have to argue with each other now. It's like, hey, once you say something and it can be verified or not verified, you have to sit with whatever whatever choice you made. Okay. So if you choose to sit on the couch and say, hey, I can't do anything, you own the choices because you technically could have looked it up and said, hey, well, what can I do just sitting on the couch at the house if I don't have a vehicle? I could record Real Housewives of Atlanta and do commentary on that. And you never left your house. Those are things that apply now that did not apply in the 80s and the 90s. And so we have to process that. And that's why I'm glad that I'm in the age that I'm in. I lived before the internet and I'm living in the internet. And so I see the differences and I can appreciate the progress that we have made because of technology. And so I want everybody not to, I think some of us are still viewing it from back in the day where like if you saw things on TV, you were thinking, okay, that's cool, but I can't be Rudy now. But yes, you can be Rudy Huxtable if you want to be now. You can be Rudy in South Carolina. You don't have to go off to California or New York to be Rudy. So that's what we're doing with our challenge, No Crime November. And then my final challenge, next slide, this is a picture of our community center. I'm on the board for the Wassamasaw Recreation League. We are trying to turn our current learning center into a vision center. And so we want to create a space for our youth and our young at heart to have a safe place in Berkeley County where they can craft their dreams. And so they would have a podcast studio or a studio space in there so you can make your music, you can make your podcast, you can make your YouTube channel if you like. You also have space to do things such as if you love to cook and you want to share it with the world, but you want to do it in your own, like we'll have a commercial kitchen in there so that you can then do your cooking or mass groups in a safe, a certified place as opposed to your home. And so we want to craft the vision that we want to live in. So if you can help us, definitely you can by dropping off donations at First Citizen Bank or hit our Zelle with wascomcenter@gmail.com. And I hope everyone learned a lot on this Zoom. And I thank you for your time today.
Well, that concludes this episode of Dear Poor People with your host, Coach Mika. Be sure to never miss an episode by following at Dear Poor People on Spotify and YouTube. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, be sure to join the DPP squad.